So in this video, I'm going over the 3 key tips for making the most out of your AVS or your Amazon Vendor Services program, also referred to as SVS or Strategic Vendor Services in some countries. So a quick intro, my name is Benjamin. I used to work at Amazon in the AVS program as a brand specialist. I was there for around 2.5 years or so. And during this time, I got to work with a lot of different vendors and saw an incredible range of different ways that vendors would use the program, with most vendors not using it correctly at all and leaving a lot of money on the table. And so hopefully by the end of this video, you'll have a clear picture of how to actually make the most out of your AVS program, out of your brand specialist, and how to make sure that you're kind of getting the bang for your buck, so to speak. So the first kind of suggestion I'd have is as a vendor on the AVS program, you will have a brand specialist. This is your main point of contact, your front door to all of Amazon, so to speak. This is the person you talk to the most often whenever you have any issue surrounding your vendor account. And so you want to have regular communication meetings, cadences set up with your brand specialist, and also with the wider AVS program. So typically in your company, you'll have an account manager, someone who looks after the Amazon account, and so they should have in place minimum quarterly, fortnightly meetings with the brand specialist, right? Depending on the size of your account, if you pay more for the program, like 200-300k, you might want to have like weekly meetings to be classified as a full vendor. Whereas if you're not that big of an account, and this depends on the marketplace, you would be classified as a light vendor, and in that case, you probably have fortnightly meetings, or you should strive to have fortnightly meetings. If you're a full vendor, you can push those to weekly. And so your weekly, or so your fortnightly business as usual, I call them, meetings with your brand specialist. This is where you go over your metrics, you go over the progress you're having week on week, the goals, your BAU, the tasks that you're tackling on, issues you're having week on week, preparing for promotional periods, tackling operational issues, just your kind of week on week tasks. And so aside from these weekly or fortnightly meetings, you should also have a quarterly business review or even a half-yearly business review. This is a separate meeting, in which case you have the account manager, you have the brand specialist. You also should invite someone senior or multiple senior people in your company. This can include your sales manager, your general manager, head of sales, whatever it is, all of them. Maybe not all of them. That would not be very productive. And so you have those contacts. You've got your brand specialist, and then your brand specialist will invite their vendor manager, or you'll make sure that they invite their vendor manager. So these quarterly business reviews are crucial. This is where you go over the more holistic account. You look at your quarterly goals and how you're tracking year on year. You're looking at your objectives, your yearly, your month, the wider objectives, programs that you're considering kind of introducing into the account, and any big long-term plays. So that's what you will go over in the quarterly business reviews. It also helps with building trust. So you really should strive to have those, and ideally have those in person as well. So again, to summarize, you have your quarterly or half-yearly business reviews where you go over the kind of wider account, and then you have your weekly or fortnightly business as usual meetings between your account manager and your brand specialist. I don't think there's any point as a sales manager or as a head of sales or a C-suite to be in those meetings. You should leave those to your brand specialist and the account manager. Potentially maybe a marketing contact if it's relevant that they join that week. But those meetings are your business as usual. You're tackling your kind of day in, day out problems, any issues that arise. So those are crucial. So that's the main thing. You have those kind of meetings, and that enables you to track your goals, which nicely segues into the second tip that I have for making the most use out of your AVS. And that is having goals, having KPIs that you track with your brand specialist. The amount of vendors that do not have these goals, or they do not track them properly, it just astounds me. Because like, if you don't have goals, everything just kind of descends into entropy and chaos. Like, over, you leave it for a week, 2 weeks, a month, you don't have any goals, eventually everyone stops tracking metrics altogether. And then with that, you don't make any progress. Everything just kind of decays. Any projects that you're working on, if you don't track it, you won't make any progress. And if you don't track it, you don't have any goals. You need goals to track it. So you need to have KPIs and goals, is the short end of it. When it comes to having metrics and goals at Amazon, there's two main types of goals they will track. The first is called your input goals. The second is your output goals. So your output goals are typically your bigger, kind of wider objectives. So these usually are your revenue and your margin, or your profitability, your net PPM. So those are the main output goals. And then your input goals are kind of, as the name suggests, are the things that you do day on, day out that drive those output goals. So for example, Amazon, typically your brand specialist will use a confirmation rate. That's the first KPI. That is percentage of orders that you've confirmed. You want to strive for at least 95%, ideally above 97%. Again, all of these goals will depend on the vendor and where you're starting at. So this is what you have in your quarterly business review. This is the discussion that you should have, is to set these goals based on where you're currently at and where you want to be. But the second goal is your lead time metrics. This is a vendor time to deliver, the time it takes to deliver stock to the Amazon's DC from your warehouse. The shorter the vendor lead time goal is, the quicker you deliver the stock, the quicker you can respond to out of stocks, the quicker you will respond to demand spikes, and the more sales you have, which again drives that output goal. The next input goal, or I guess you can call it an output goal, is your item data quality metric. This is a score out of 100 expressed as a percentage. So your item data IDQ being short for item data quality, is a percentage score which pretty much tells you how complete your catalog is in terms of images, videos, A+ content, media, all those kind of merchandising elements. If you've maximized all of your images, your A+ content, your SEO, your keywords, number of bullet points, all of that, you'll have a score of 100%. And so you should strive to have a IDQ score of 100%. And so that's a goal you can set. Your brand specialist will have a report that they can run internally, which will give you your IDQ, your current IDQ score. And again, you should run that every quarter. Every quarter, I think, is enough. Maybe every 2-3 months. Every 2 months, 3 months is a quarter. Every 2 month or two to track that IDQ score. And then lastly, in terms of kind of your output goal or your input goals, is your out of stock goal. So what percentage of products have been out of stock for customers? You want this to be as low as possible, ideally under 3%. And so you should set that goal. Again, it's pretty self-explanatory. The less you are out of stock, the less sales you lose, and the more your products will grow. Very important. So that's one to track. And then lastly, your two output goals, your revenue and your margin, net PPM. So again, net PPM, pretty self-explanatory. Typically, your brand specialist will not oversee net PPM. That is the responsibility of the vendor manager. So between the vendor manager and probably your sales manager or your head of sales, it's something that's quite structural. You're looking at your terms, your cost prices, and so that's a conversation you should have with them. Again, probably tracking it quarterly or whatever the case may be. And then lastly, your revenue goal. So Amazon track a number of different revenue goals. This can be like your customer sales or your purchase orders. So from you to Amazon, or from Amazon to the customer, or PCOGs is typically what they track internally. PCOGs stands for product cost of goods sold, which is the sales to customers at cost price. So number of units sold times your cost price to Amazon. But again, there's not like the nuances. It doesn't matter that much. All of these metrics pretty much track the same thing, and that is, are customers buying your products, and if so, how much are they buying? So just make sure you're tracking the same thing as your brand specialist, and you should be good to go. So again, KPIs, you should set these, maybe once half a year, every quarter, depending on the size of your account, and then you should track them with your brand specialist whenever you have your fortnightly meetings, and then that way you can see when they go up, down, and more importantly, why do they go up or down. So those are your goals, KPIs. Super important. If there's one thing I had to pick, it would be making sure you set those in place and that you track them, and you can explain why they go up and down, if they go up and down, which they will. Anyway, so that's goals. Then lastly, I strongly suggest getting senior stakeholders involved where it is relevant for them to be involved. So as I mentioned, your quarterly business reviews are an opportunity for you to get the senior stakeholders involved in your company, but also to get the senior stakeholders at Amazon involved, which typically will be the vendor manager, maybe the senior vendor manager, category manager. So this is where you want to bring everyone together. This is also kind of on a similar note, it's an opportunity to build trust with your AVS, which you want to do. Ideally you have your QBRs in person. It helps build trust, and it helps maintain the relationship with AVS. So again, this kind of third point is about maintaining a relationship with the AVS, which most vendors do not do. And they're just little things like, again, having the QBR in person, or at least meeting with your brand specialist in person at some point, with your vendor manager. That helps build trust, helps build a relationship. If you're launching new products, you want to send some samples to your brand specialist and to your vendor manager. Few vendors do that, and it's like, doesn't cost you anything, or depending on the selling price of your products. But again, the benefit that you'll get in terms of building that relationship of trust and loyalty with your AVS by sending them some free samples, sending them some jokes, having some banter, will far exceed the actual cost of those goods in most cases. So send them some samples. If you launch a new product or when you're starting to work with them, send them some samples. It really does make us kind of a small difference in the relationship that you have with your brand specialist, which few vendors do. And so if you've done that well, your brand specialist, again, to make the point, your brand specialist will look after multiple accounts. You will most likely not be their only account. Depending on the size of your account, like if you're Apple, then probably you are their only account. However, if you're not Apple, which if you're listening to this, probably not, then more likely than not, your brand specialist will have multiple accounts. Depending on the size, maybe like 4 accounts, 5. Again, depending if you're a full vendor and you pay them more, versus if you're a light vendor and you pay them slightly less, in which case they'll have more accounts. So again, this third point about building that relationship of trust with your brand specialist will really help you be front center of mind above the other accounts that they're working with. So yeah, that's pretty much it. The last point I had was tenure or churn. So like every other company in the world, Amazon will have churn. In my experience, a brand specialist on average will probably stay with the account for around 2 years. If they've done a good job, at that point they get promoted. They can still be on as a senior brand specialist, but typically that 2-year mark is where they start to kind of explore maybe other roles within the company, or what happens quite often is they move to the category management role. managing a category, so being a vendor manager. Potentially even before that, like at the year mark, they might get moved to a different account. I know that happened to me. I was moved to a different category at roughly the, after a year of being at Amazon, so that may happen. But otherwise, they might quit before then. That's an option. But yeah, typically an average like that 2-year mark is where you can probably start to expect them to move on. Because at that point, the discussion starts to be held at Amazon. It's like, do you want to move? Do you want to, like, in terms of career progression? Do you want to, either they're doing a good job and they'll start to explore other different options, or they'll probably get, put on a performance plan if they're not. So, yeah, that 2-year mark. But that concludes the information from this video. Hopefully it was helpful. Feel free to book a time, a free audit call, where I can go into this in a more tailored, structured way specifically for your vendor account, totally free. Follow the link in the description to book a call for that. And otherwise, have a good day. Bye.